Hi, I'm Carrie Lee Merritt, and welcome back to Meritocracy. Sitting here today with my friend, who's now running for House District 67 in Georgia, Angela Mayfield. Thank you again for being here today.
Oh, Carrie Lee, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a blast already.
So we're going to go over just a few key policy positions so that people get an idea of what you're running for, what your name on the ballot this election cycle in Georgia could mean, not only for your constituents, but for the people of the entire state.
Yes, under the Gold Dome.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of your key positions that you're really, really passionate about?
Obviously, science-based education with regard to reproductive education, reproductive policy, obviously with regard to House Bill 41. I hate to keep saying it by name because there will always be another one. Mm-hmm. There will always be another misogynistic bill. I don't believe that policy regarding our human bodies as women, as non-binary people, as people who are capable of becoming pregnant, I don't believe that that policy should be made by people who could not pass freshman biology. So there's that, and I would also like to see, stronger science-based sex and reproductive education in our public schools. I think that that's absolutely critical. There should not be one section of human biology that we don't talk about because we're afraid it will offend a morality. Mm-hmm. That ignorance is in nobody's best interest.
And again, every single state, locality that has done any kind of program where this is part of the sex education program has seen drastic reductions in teenage pregnancy,
Absolutely.
Drastic reductions, sexually transmitted disease rates have dropped.
Yes, we know categorically we have qualitative and quantitative data over many, many years from many, many different places in many different communities that the absolute solution to teenage pregnancy is comprehensive, science-based sex education. We know that. We absolutely know that. There's no arguing that. It's just a matter of whose morality is offended by that and whose desires are served by keeping people ignorant. And so I absolutely want to see science-based education. My whole purpose is to keep people alive and healthy in Georgia. So that means common sense gun control legislation.
And you are a gun owner. For people that don't know, you were like I was raised in a culture that hunts, raised in a culture that's what you do for fun a lot of times. And
yes.
So you're coming from somebody who knows this intimately.
My purse right now has a .38 in it. Absolutely. My dad was a sharpshooter. He was a Marine for many, many years and a hunter for many more years. So I inherited his guns, and I also have the ones that I personally owned and have obtained myself. I shot competitively for a short time, and
there was even talk of Olympics, right?
There was. I
had whispering.
I had bad outcomes after LASIK surgery. But yeah, absolutely. It is a great system of personal competition, of competing against your own personal best. That said, for me, it is a sport. It's my silly bang bang hobby. I love it, but it's dangerous for other people. And it poses an existential threat to liberty and the pursuit of happiness and life for many people here in my state. I would give up every single one of my guns if it meant that nobody ever had to be afraid going to the movies again. I would throw them all in a volcano in a heartbeat. And I think that there are a lot of responsible gun owners who feel that way. I feel like my feelings about responsible gun ownership are informed by having been a responsible gun owner. 90% of the education that I received from my dad, from my shooting coaches, from my granddad was all about how to safely handle and store the guns. The directions on how to squeeze the trigger and hold your breath while you do it, that's the least important part. I am certain that there are other responsible gun owners who were raised up and trained the same way that I was. And I really want to connect with them and recognize that responsible gun ownership involves an element of responsible gun control.
Absolutely.
I mean,
you know the gravity when you actually have spent time with guns. You know the gravity of the situation.
You see what they can do.
Why would you want everyone to have the right to that kind of ownership?
Gun ownership, as we know it today, is in no way enshrined in the Second Amendment. I think what was intended by the Second Amendment is not at all what we see here now. And furthermore, even if it was, assume that it was, you're talking about a document that was written by slave-owning white men to support a gentry that looked like them, and also they knew they weren't right about everything. What's the old line? The genius of the Constitution is that it can always be changed. They knew that they weren't correct about everything. So we can recognize that the Founding Fathers are a lot like our own fathers and not right about everything all the time.
And literally wrote it as a living document that can be amended, that can be changed. And that was a product of the times in which it was written. Not even to fight off any kind of foreign influence, but as slaveholders, as you pointed out so rightly, as slaveholders, you needed guns, you needed a militia, you needed firearms in order to put down any kind of possible slave revolt, rebellion, any kind of biracial coalition. You had to have firepower. You had to have a way to make people stop.
But that's not how we affect change in our government now. And so when I hear people talk about, I have to keep my guns so that I can fight back against the government when the government comes for my guns. Bro, you were never a law-abiding gun owner. Like, you were never a responsible gun owner. If that's your argument, that you're gonna fight your government, then like you are already an outlaw just on premise, because what they gave us as a solution to amend our Constitution, our living documents, and address our grievances is a legislature. That's what they gave us. That's your response to a tyrannical government. And we have one now, and we have a legislature, and that's how we address it. It's not a matter of guns. Who are you killing? Who are you who are you shooting? Aren't we past this? Shouldn't we be past this? And if you're fantasizing about a time when you can shoot figures of authority, then you were never a law-abiding gun owner.
Right.
Ever. The definition of what is law-abiding is in some cases kind of under question, but I also feel like there's a whole lot of P-pops and papaws and granddads like mine and like yours who understand absolutely the gravity of owning a gun. And I also recognize that some gun control legislation, as we know it now, what we think of as common sense gun control legislation, is very easily weaponized against communities of color.
Yes. Absolutely.
Especially with regard to mental health. Red flag laws. Of course, we think red flag laws are a good thing, but there's a lot of cases where those laws will be specifically and intentionally exercised against communities of color to disarm communities of color.
And women even, right?
And women, and
you want to associate any kind of depression or run-of-the-mill, whatever you're visiting a therapist for, that you can be marked and not be a gun owner, literally when you're going to therapy to deal with an abusive situation.
Absolutely. There's so many situations where an abusive husband might say, well, she has a gun in the house. You never know. She has a gun in the house with my children. So it's an opportunity to, interrupt custody agreements. That it's an opportunity to interrupt communities of color.
So what do you see as common sense gun legislation then? Would it be requiring more education, more hours with the gun, more training, more? Would it be licensing and taxing people and actually having some kind of stake in the insurance game?
So I think, and I realize that this is an unusual thing to say as a Democrat, is a strange thing to say, but I'm not sure taxation is the solution. When we think of other dangerous undertakings that we have, things that we do that can pose a risk to others around us in our communities, things that we exercise, like, for instance, driving, we expect certain things. Yes, driving is a right to some degree, a privilege, but we expect certain things of people who exercise that privilege, which is that they will insure their vehicles, that in a state like Georgia, that, in the Atlanta metro area, that they will be inspected for emissions, because we all have to breathe this air. We expect them to be operable, to be currently tagged and licensed. We expect certain things. We can say it's a right, your right to drive. You can lose that right if you misbehave. You can have that right suspended or taken away from you permanently. But we all operate under these systems and recognize that it is for our better unified good. I think, considering that cars and vehicles are methods of conveyance, not things designed to hurl projectiles through soft tissue at high rates of speed, which is what all guns are for, whether you're hunting for food or, shooting targets like I tend to do. Their job is to hurl projectiles at high rates of speed through soft things. That's their job. And that, I think, removes any judgment about, like, they're designed to harm or kill. Nope, they hurl projectiles. That's what they do very, very quickly. And if you recognize that that can be very, very dangerous, more so even than cars, then obviously the next most sensible solution would be insuring them. I cannot believe that I have a rider on my homeowner's policy for double locking windows, for my security system, for all of the other things that I've put in place for my fire suppression system. And yet I called my insurance agent, and there's no way for me to insure the guns in my house other than for their replacement value. What if they're stolen and they're used in a robbery? What if they're stolen and they kill somebody? It seems to me like that's a solution that the private market could actually provide a solution to. That's a possibility. I would love to be able to pay to insure my guns. Most law-abiding or responsible gun owners that I know would be more than happy to do the same thing. So I think that there's that. Perhaps also passing a non-NRA course. When I came up, my first gun safety course was a National Rifle Association, because that's what they were.
That's all that's offered.
They were
right?
a gun safety group. They, so that's how I learned. I got my NRA safe handler certificate when I was so proud. I was like 14, and my mom would take me to the gun range on Wednesday nights because you got your lane time for free if you bought your ammunition there. It was ladies' night at the gun range. My mom and I would go because it was cheaper than going to the movies. And that's what my mom and I did. And it was a wonderful bonding experience. I don't want to deny that of anybody.
Right.
But I also want to make sure that the communities of color, the vulnerable communities, the elderly, children in anybody who is at more risk of being harmed by a gun is not harmed. I just want to reduce risk and harm. So I think that there's a lot of conversation to be had with my fellow gun owners. I'm looking forward to hearing all. I'm looking forward to hearing all of their thoughts about that.
I'm sure you'll
I'm
get
sure
a lot.
I will hear a lot of it. But my object is not to take everybody's guns away. I don't want anybody taking mine away too. I would give them up if I was sure that it would provide safety and security for my neighbors and my fellow Georgians. I would happily give them up. I know that it won't. I think that there's a lot of conversations to be had about what qualifies as responsible gun ownership. Absolutely need to talk about high capacity magazines, semi-automatics, and how nobody needs an AR-15. I own an AR-15. I don't need an AR-15. Nobody needs an AR-15. So I think that there's a lot of conversation to be had about it. I hope, as a gun owner and as a gun user and as a part of gun culture, even if it's a little on the fringes, I hope that the conversations that I have with my fellow gun owners will be taken seriously.
If anybody's got street cred, you've got it.
I have skin in this game. I have a dog in this fight.
Right.
I really do.
It's I'm obviously pretty far to the left on a lot of this stuff, even though I do come from a culture where hunting was of great importance. In Appalachia, you survive on deer meat for a lot of the winter, and not only that, but your food pantries, what churches give out, that's deer meat in the winter, right? You are here in a hunting culture.